Welcome back. I'm Professor Shu. We're getting into the tactical side of marketing. We've thought about our strategy. Now we're going to start thinking about how to actually bring it out to the customer. And the first pieces of doing that we'll talk about in this video are product branding and our place choices, which is our distribution channel. So just to remind you of where we are on our framework, we've talked about the situation analysis with the 3 C's, we've done segmentation, targeting, and positioning as part of our strategy, and now we're getting into these 4 P's along the bottom and doing those first ones of product and place, the bookends of that set of 4 P's that you see. All right, so let's get into thinking about products and especially branding, because this is where we can brand our product to set it apart and really express the positioning that we decided on as part of our strategy. So when we think about products, the first thing to think about is what is the product itself that we're offering. And we talked earlier about translating features into benefits. If we think about the product, we can break it into a couple of pieces. There's the core product, which is the basic primary benefit that the customer gets from using it. Then there's the actual product, which you can think of as some of the physical aspects of it, or some of the real elements of how the product is delivered to the customer. And then finally, there's the enhanced product. And this is where a lot of the psychological benefits or self-expressive benefits start to exert themselves as part of the package that the customer is getting. To make this more tangible, let's walk through an actual example. Imagine a car. The core product that a customer buys a car for is transportation, getting from point A to point B. The actual product, the physical elements of a car, can include its color, its engine size, how luxurious the interior is, what the brand name is that's on the outside of the car, all of those other elements of the features, and thinking about those in terms of what the customer gets from them. But then when we think about the enhanced product, there's a couple of other elements that come in. Some of them can be reduction of risk, like providing good warranties or the opportunity for really excellent service by the provider. But some of them are more psychological benefits, like buying a car that's just fun to drive or lets you show off a little bit to your friends and neighbors. Those are elements of the enhanced product. And that's where, for a lot of products, the real power can come through, especially when we talk about branding. So when we get into branding, branding allows us to get to that enhanced element of the product. It moves beyond the tangible elements, the physical parts of the product, and into some of the intangible aspects. So if we think about a tangible physical product, it's made in a factory. It might be easy for a competitor to copy its look and its feel and some of its features, but it also becomes outdated over time, especially technological products where the engineering is always changing and moving forward. When we think about the intangible elements of a product, like a brand, this is something that lives in the customer's mind, and it's unique and it's timeless. It doesn't age out as the technology changes. So for example, if I talk about an Apple iPhone, the iPhone itself might change with each new version, but what Apple stands for and what the name iPhone stands for is based on associations that the customer is carrying around with them and their own previous interactions and history with that brand. We'll come back to that idea of those mental connections that build around a brand in just a moment. To take another example, I have up here 2 different perfumes, both provided by Christian Dior, and one is called Poison and the other is called J'adore. And if we look at those 2 perfumes, we can learn a lot about the positioning of those particular products based just on the brand names and the packaging and some of the other physical elements of them. And so for example, the perfume Poison we might expect to be more dark and musky smelling, whereas the perfume J'adore we might expect to be more light and floral smelling. And the type of person that we think would be attracted to those different perfumes and the way that they are marketed and advertised is going to reflect those different positionings. And for a lot of people who aren't necessarily good at detecting differences in smells between perfumes, other than at a very high level, that positioning really helps clarify in the customer's mind what the benefits are that they're getting. Which is why branding experts Reese and Trout have said the single most important decision in marketing perfume is the name, because that's really how the brand and the positioning gets communicated out to the customer. So when we talk about brands, we can talk about brand equity and this idea of associations in memory. And I brought up Apple earlier, and when we think about Apple, people have a lot of things that will come to mind. They might remember past advertising that Apple has done. They might remember the Apple founder. They might remember some of the different products that come to mind, whether it's recent products like iPhones and iPods and iPads or laptops, or all the way back to some of the original Macintosh computers. The history that someone has with a brand, all of the exposures they've had to that brand, both their personal interactions and the advertising they've seen, becomes part of what we walk around with in our head as this knowledge structure that we have learned over time. And that's the essence of brand equity, that within each of us at an individual level, we have some set of associations that goes with that product and that brand. When we take that set of associations at the customer level and we start thinking about how that rolls up to the marketplace, we see that there's 3 levels of brand equity. At the customer level, there's those associative networks that we just looked at. But what that implies is that at the product level, when I go into the store to buy a new iPhone, I might be willing to pay more to get that Apple brand name because of the associations that I already have associated with that brand. So it changes my willingness to pay. When we roll up that product level impact to a firm level, that changes how the firm is valued in the open marketplace and especially in the stock market. And so if we look at Apple as a company, a big piece of Apple's valuation is the strength of its brand. And for all of the brands that I have up here on this slide, these are companies that are very highly valued in the marketplace because they have these incredibly powerful brand names that all of us walk around with at an individual level stored in our memory. And that's the power of brand equity. So now that we've talked about products and branding, we're going to move on to another one of our 4 Ps, which is place. And that also means distribution channel. Distribution channels are how we get our product from our company out into the hands of the customer. When we think about distribution channels, they can be described based on their structure and the number of levels that they have. So some distribution channels have multiple levels, like going from a manufacturer to a distributor to a retailer who then sells it to the customer. Other times the manufacturer might have a more direct channel using its own stores or selling through the internet directly to customers, or even having a sales force that goes out and visits customers one-on-one. So all of these decisions about the structure and levels that a channel is going to be set up with come back to understanding something about our customers, but also need to take into account the types of channels that we have available to us. So we can describe channels on some other characteristics beyond just the number of levels that we use. We can think about how they're governed and whether we have channels that are going to follow us carefully when we ask them to use certain kinds of positioning or messaging or describing things to the customers, or whether the channels are going to go off and do a little bit of their own thing. We can also think about how intense we want our coverage to be. Do we want our channels to be everywhere so that they're available to every possible customer, or do we want to be more focused and have only a few stores that offer our product and be more elite? And so you can think about some products like Coke or Pepsi that want to be available to every customer everywhere at any moment, but other products, perhaps like a Ferrari, that only a few stores are allowed to sell and have a much more elite element to them and therefore much less intensity of coverage, where you really have to go out of your way to be able to find that product. So that's a way of thinking about some of the different elements of channels. Now let's go back to thinking about our customers and what their needs are. And notice that because we've already done our strategy and we've thought carefully about who our target customer is, we should know something about what their needs are in terms of what kind of channels they're going to look for. So when we think about channels and customers' needs, we can break it down to 2 main elements. One is, what kind of information does the customer need? And what's the best way to provide that information to the customer? The other is, what kind of logistics does the customer need? How do they need the product actually delivered to them, and what's the most efficient way to do that? So let's walk through both of these in a little bit more detail. When we think about information for the customer, that can be things like demonstrations, education about how the product works, or just other information that's provided to the customer at the point of sale. When we provide information to our customers, what we have to realize is that the more levels we put into our distribution channel, the more that information is going to deteriorate, in the sense that our retailers might not be able to describe the product as well as we can as the manufacturer. And so, as the company that supplies the product, we can do the best job of providing that information, and when information is really important to our customer, when they need that assistance in seeing how the product works or being educated about it, then we see shorter channels, such as having a sales force or our own stores where we can really show off the product and explain it. What about the flip side, logistics? What are the logistics needs of the customer? Logistics are things like how much assortment or variety there is to choose from and how close it is to me. Can I find a retailer that provides it that's not very far away? And so when we think about things like grocery stores, they're terrific at providing logistics because we can go in and find a lot of different manufacturers, a lot of different brands, all in one place that's hopefully not too far from home and makes it easy for us and convenient for us to get those products. So when customers really value logistics and value variety, then we will see more levels within our distribution channel. We'll see things like grocery stores pop up so that customers can have one central place to go to instead of having to go to specialized stores for each one of those in particular products. But notice that they aren't going to provide necessarily as much information or demonstration about those products. We need the customers to be much more self-sufficient in knowing what it is that they want. So the takeaway there, when availability is important to the end user, we see these longer channels with more intermediate steps in them. So to think about how we make our channel decisions, we're going to think about how our end users need these trade-offs between information and logistics. We're going to go back to thinking about the channels we have available to us, and we're going to decide, do we need more of a direct sales type of a channel or more of a distributor type of a channel, and think about some of the issues that go with managing both of those. For direct sales, we need to set the incentives up right, but even for distributors, we need to set the incentives up right, so that our end retailer is providing things that our customers need at the right time and place. Okay, so we've covered 2 of our 4 P's so far. We've covered the product and thought about branding and the importance of brands as this intangible attribute that lives in the customer's mind. We've also thought about the place or distribution channel and thought about how the customer's needs for information and logistics drive those decisions of which distribution channels we're going to use and how many layers those distribution channels are going to have on its way from the company to the hands of the customer. Coming up next, we're going to talk about the last of our 4 P's, which is pricing and promotion, and that will wrap up the tactical aspects of marketing and sales and help finalize how we get our product out into the hands of the customer.